kind of branches of opportunities there. And now I'm at Stifel in investment banking. I focus specifically in industrials. I've been here for 4 years, which is a lot longer dated than most people's 10 years in banking. You kind of uh, tend to do the transition to private equity or other buy side roles, but I've had a great time so far. Really looking forward to answering your questions. And similar to Danny, the process of getting into the finance world can seem very complicated and opaque. But one of my favorite things that one of my professors said in college was finance is just really basic information using big words to make other people feel like they don't know what they're talking about. So hopefully we can be here to answer some of those big word questions and give you a little bit of additional color into what we do on a day-to-day basis. So
Awesome. And
Danny, should we do introductions on y'all's side? I
yeah,
don't know who wants
that'd be
to
great.
lead off.
Yeah, I'll kick us off, Curtis. So I'll go, then Curtis, then we'll let the students introduce themselves. So Danny, we've already met. Rachel, it's great to meet you. Thank you for making time. My name is Chris West. My career background is in investment banking at Rothschild & Co. Then I did a stint in secondaries at HarborVest Partners, and I just finished my time at HIG Capital doing buyouts investing. I used to sit right next to Connor, whom I'm sure you know, and I'm going to be starting at Stanford Business School coming up now. So we are Wall Street Connection. We have a whole large advisory board who maybe one day you will meet. It's about 7 of them. They're all based in New Orleans. And we have 2 programs, which is this one, which we have 4 students. 2 of them couldn't make it today due to some personal reasons. And we have another program, which is an investment competition. We started this to introduce high school students to investment banking and private equity because we saw that the pipeline to get in is starting much earlier. And these are students who they don't have any experience with private equity, investment banking. So we're just exposing them to it. So they've learned a little bit about commercial banking already, as well as like wealth management. Today, it's their opportunity to learn about sell-side finance. We're grateful that you all are here to help them learn about that. Curtis, you want to give your introduction?
Keying off that, as Chris said, my name is Curtis Johnson. I also work in finance, actually investment banking at the Royal Bank of Canada, where I work in industrials. So Rachel, great to see another industrials person. I'm also thinking of doing investment banking longer term. So after this call, maybe I can talk to you more about your journey. Love that. We want to exemplify what it means to not only be a part of something, but to truly invest your time into having a future that will then be able to lead others to also find paths of fulfillment. That's really what Wall Street Connection is at its core, helping students that may have otherwise not have obtained opportunities, such as the ones that we have, find those opportunities in the real world. I like to talk about Wall Street Connection from the lens of, in my personal experience, I never even heard about sell-side finance or any kind of finance until I got to college. And it was a very tumultuous path for me even getting to college. So had I not gotten that opportunity, I would have never gained this exposure. And that's the problem we are trying to fix here. So again, really appreciate you all jumping on the call. And I'm excited. I think I can learn a lot from both of you today. And from that, I would love for Kennedy to go ahead and introduce herself. I see you're rocking the cool shades today.
My name is Kennedy, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Sorry about that. Maybe a little bit more guidance, like share where you go to school and maybe one thing that you're, maybe one cool thing about yourself. I didn't mention that I also studied Arabic in high school. Lost all of it as well, but I still practice a little bit on Duolingo. So, share a fun fact about yourself, what high school you're going to, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kennedy. I go to McDonough 35, and I used to know how to speak fluent in Spanish, but I kind of stopped speaking it for like 2 years. So.
A lot of language fun facts there. I love it.
Oh, one additional thing to add is maybe one thing you're hoping to get out of the session with Proforma Futures today. You mind adding that, Kennedy?
One thing, I don't know.
Okay.
Keep it open.
It's
I
good
like
to
that.
be an open book too, and have no expectations.
Go ahead, your turn.
My name is Jalea, and I attend St. Catherine Drexel Prep. I know a little bit of sign language, if that's a fun fact.
Definitely.
And with this, I'm willing to get out of more education on whatever you guys are about to talk about.
Awesome. Do you want us to take it from here, Chris?
Yeah, you have
Presentation?
the host, so you're able to share your screen.
Awesome. So we'll just walk through this quick presentation that we shared beforehand, and we'll start with a quick overview of just Proforma Futures. And so we're an educational nonprofit focused on improving diversity in finance. We have over 150 volunteers across all the different subsegments of finance. And our mission is really to support underrepresented and diverse candidates and help them break into finance if they're interested. And so we support. This is kind of a picture of all of our mentors, just to show people you can reach out to on the website, and we'll show you that in a little bit. But these are all of our mentors. We support students in 4 different ways, and a lot of this is going to overlap with what Chris and Curtis are doing as well. But first, we want to introduce students to finance, just open the door, explain kind of what it is, and make the industry less opaque. Next, we'll provide career guidance and recruiting prep. And a little bit later, I'll show some resources on the website that we have to help you think through this. And then lastly, we offer one-on-one mentorship with our 150 mentors. So one of the most important things you can do in finance and to learn about the industry is just to talk to people. It is an industry where relationships go a long way. And so networking and talking to people is a big benefit as you're learning about the industry. And Rachel.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different verticals of finance, and what Danny and I have expertise in is the investment banking and then some of the asset management, obviously specifically private equity verticals, but there are a lot of different avenues that you can go down if you're interested in it. And so we'll speak more to those first two in terms of our experience, how the timing works. But if you're interested in finance and or you don't find investment banking, PE interesting, there are a lot of other different avenues to go. I worked in corporate finance for a little bit, had the S&T background, sales and trading background. So if you have any questions there that we're not able to answer, we're more than happy to put you in touch with one of the mentors who does have experience there. But it's very easy to think about the industry just being 1 or 2 buckets when there are at least 6 main ones and probably many more that we should have included on this page as well.
Mm-hmm.
So moving
Very, very high level.
very high level. So Danny, I don't know if you want to lead off here. I can as well. There are a number of different roles that you can take right off the bat. And so there's a couple key areas that you should consider if you're thinking about a role in finance, specifically in the sell side space. But it really comes down to what is your potential job function going to be? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And then what's the related compensation? One of the things that I was very surprised by, I come from a very blue collar background. My mom thinks I work as a bank teller. I don't. She was like, why are you working so much if banks are only open from 9 to 5? And I had to politely tell her I didn't work in that type of bank, but a different type of bank. So it came as a little bit of a shock for her as well as me. But in banking, you do work across the sale, purchase, and capital raising process for a client company. What I really like about that is you have a very easily applied skill set that you get to develop in terms of Excel, PowerPoint, strategic thinking. You have a lot of camaraderie with your fellow analysts and associates. The guys that I work with, and I say guys as a weirdly gender neutral, I have a very big group of people that I work with, but the group of people that I work with see me the most out of anyone else in my life, and they tend to also be my closest friends. I'm going to weddings and housewarmings as part of kind of my job friend group, not just clocking in and out with them. And you also have a lot of mobility after doing a year or two in banking. You can exit to a lot of different opportunities. And we'll get into some of those, but if you have any additional questions, we're happy to dive into that with you. The downside of banking is that, particularly in your first 2 years, you're going to work a lot of hours. This can range anywhere between hopefully 60 to 70, but I've worked upwards of 100 plus a week, and that comes with a lot of stress. I personally knew that it was going to be a decision that I was going to be very comfortable with putting myself in that situation because I knew what I wanted to get out of it. And it ended up being a very rewarding process, but definitely had some stressful nights, some stressful mornings that I had to work through. Compensate for that, your first year compensation can come out quite attractive. That was something that I sought after school. I had my own student loans going through college, and I needed to have an income stream that would start to help me pay that off. So your comp can range from 85 to 160K a year, inclusive and exclusive of bonus. So that's going to be your range there. So that's the brief overview of kind of a couple points on the banking side. Danny, do you want to talk about the asset management and kind of where you're seeing in terms of how you can exit there?
Rachel,
Sure.
before
Definitely.
I
Go ahead,
go to
Peter.
asset management, could you just quickly in 3 bullets say just what an investment banker does on a day-to-day basis, and just quickly go over just again how that compensation is structured too, and like why they make so much money. So
Yeah, let's save the 3 bullets of what bank, or actually, Danny, do you want to just hop down to the post-grad investment banking deep dive? This, I think, will help address it a little bit more. Yep, that one's perfect. So in terms of what we do on the investment banking side, we work with companies or with the company's owners to help facilitate the purchase or sale. So essentially, if you have a business and want to sell it, you'll come hire me, hopefully, to help you sell that business, or my MD. Then my MD, managing director, will then take his team and we will help facilitate the sale of that company. So that can result in a lot of different work streams or types of work that you need to do to help that process. When you're an analyst, you'll typically be helping out in terms of using Excel to model out cash flows or the company's financial statements in order to understand where the business is headed. Then you will help in PowerPoint and also just like aggregating information in order to understand the business and then help market it to potential buyers. Those 2 main work streams are then worked through the levels of banking. So there's a very clear hierarchy in terms of where you come in or where you leave the firm in terms of rank. So it starts as the analyst level. That's typically your first 2 to 3 years. Then there's associate, VP, and then the naming difference kind of varies on the bank by bank, but then there's directors and managing directors, MDs. That's kind of your rough 5 levels. So as an analyst, you're at the most junior level. So you're going to be helping support these different functions, but you're not going to like own any one of them by yourself. It's going to be very much a supporting role. That being said, a lot of the work ends up being stuff that you can work on, and that's where you're really going to be able to dig in and help with the modeling, the building of materials. And what I didn't realize when I looked at finance is that the numbers and the math is very, very important, but you're doing as much sales and marketing and positioning in what would be more of a traditional marketing role in your head than just sitting with numbers. It's a very evenly balanced role from that perspective. So because of all that and how much work you have to oversee or help out on, that's where you're going to see the compensation come in. It takes a lot of time to do those different things, and so you're going to get paid accordingly. Typically, and I'll speak for how Stiefel does it, and then Danny, it may be helpful to hear how you saw it at Piper, but typically you're given a base salary. Right now, the typical entry salary is around 100K across the street. When I say across the street, it's just the average that most banks pay a first-year analyst. And then your you should expect to see between 30 to 60% of your base salary in a bonus number that happens annually. So you'll get incremental payments like you would a regular paycheck, and then once a year you'll get a check that is equivalent to the bonus number that I just mentioned.
So
Yeah.
Danny,
that
is that how you thought at
just
Piper?
I was gonna say, yeah, so yeah, it was very similar at Piper, kind of the upfront salary and then a larger bonus. And they keep a lot of that variable, which is interesting just because of how variable the business is. Um, Kind of selling businesses doesn't happen every single year. And some years you might sell 10, some years you might sell 3. And so they really keep that salary variable. But if you sell 10 companies in a year, you can make a lot more money. And so they kind of spread that a little bit more. But agreed. Go ahead, Chris.
yeah. So I was just clarifying that. So right out of college, you've done your 4 years. All across the street, you'll make base $100,000, and then once a year, you'll get a bonus based off of how much business was done in that year. That is a percentage of what that base salary was. So in numbers terms, when they say 60, like 30 to 60, that means $30,000 to $60,000 on top of that $100,000 base salaries. So at the end of the year, you would have 130 to 170, $160,000 before taxes. Obviously, taxes take a lot out of it. And it's all based around how much business you're driving. And another quick question, could you explain, Danny, you've said a couple of times, opaque, what that word means in the context of, getting into the business and even when investors talk about an opaque market?
No, thank you. So opaque, really the best word would be just unclear. It's hard to understand and not for like a good reason. Like it's just like if you have a glass of orange juice, you can't see through it. It's unclear, and a glass of water you can see through it. And so the idea is just to clear it up, make it understandable, because it really is. As Rachel said, it's a lot of big words, and um it's not as complicated as people like to make it out to seem.
Thank you guys so much for really explaining investment banking to them. The reason why we had you all go in such depth is they already know like about lawyers, engineers, and doctors, but many people don't know that there's careers you can have right after 4 years of school where you can make just as much as those lawyers, doctors, engineers. So very helpful for them to know that.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great point because when I went into school, I thought I wanted to go a legal route and maybe study the law and then do my 2 to 3 years in law school and then become a practicing lawyer and then do my whole career thing. But for me at the time, I didn't have the financial flexibility or the timing flexibility to delay essentially my earnings start by an extra couple of years just based on where I was financially from my perspective. And for everybody that's different. And if you have familial support, that's phenomenal and you have that option. But for me, I was like, where can I start to jumpstart my trajectory very, very early on? And so um, it was a decision that was very much lucky. I thought I was going to go work at like the CIA based on my background at school, and I had to switch away from that really quick. But it was really a kind of a sticker shock in the best way for me when I learned about how the earnings is structured, how earnings are structured, and when we talk about being a first year analyst, how Curtis was walking through it, and how Danny did as well. That's just your first year, and so every year your base salary goes up by 10 to 20K, and then your bonus grows by the same kind of percentage amount, hopefully along the lines of how your business is performing or how your group is performing. So that kind of brings us to how we see these banks structured. And what is one of the most important things as you think about this as a career is that each bank is going to be slightly different in terms of how they approach their structure. And this is going to be much more important when you're in college, you're thinking about this recruiting cycle, but I'm going to give you a really high level, quick overview of product versus coverage so you can think about it and see if it's something that can fit with your interests. So there's two main buckets. One is called product and one is called coverage. It sounds complicated, but it's not, so bear with me. Product, Within the product group, there are a number of different services that we can offer our clients. We can help them sell their company. We can help them raise money for their company. We can help them issue equity for their company. There are multiple different products that you can offer, and we don't need to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but there are groups that specialize in a product, like mergers and acquisitions. That's just selling and buying companies, or helping sell and buy companies. Or you could say, I'd like to help raise debt for companies. That'll be our leverage finance product. Banks will have those groups that specialize in that function, and you can go work in those groups. Or you can work in something called coverage. And so when I introduced myself and said that I work in industrials, I am a coverage banker of the industrials vertical. So I will work just with industrials companies, but I might see the sale of a company. I might work on the buy side of a company. I also might work in debt and equity for some company within the industrials vertical. So if you think about it in kind of like rows and columns, you'll have products and you'll have industries, and they'll intersect at certain points. You can work in either of those. I personally chose an industry-based group because I wanted to know the most about that type of market, and I wanted to know about my clients. Some people like products because they get to be very, very, very technical and specific on how those products work, but they want to see all of the different industries. They'll get to see industrials or consumer or healthcare. I was like, you know what? I just want to be good at one industry, and that's how I approached it. So everybody has different preferences, but you'll hear bankers talk about different verticals or different coverage areas, kind of synonymously around where they sit of being industrials, consumer, M&A, et cetera. Does that make sense? I know I went through it a little bit quickly, but any questions there? All right. If none, we can talk really quickly about down the line opportunities. So if we can just stay on that page really quick. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll come into banking out of college as an analyst. That is the universal title for someone right out of school. And there are a number of different routes that you can take after doing investment banking as an analyst. Not everyone stays in IB, investment banking, for longer than a year or two. A lot of people, myself included, went into the role saying, you know what, I'm going to do 1 or 2 years. I'm going to get this phenomenal skill set. I'm going to work all these hours. And I'm going to be a very marketable employee in a different industry. So if you decide to stay in IB, the path like we talked about is associate VP, senior VP, director, managing director. That will take approximately 10 to 12 years to go the full route, I think. 12 to 15 is probably a little bit closer. And it's really 3 years block at each level if you think about it that way. If investment banking is not for you after a year or two, there are a number of different ways that you can exit. Danny did this, and I'm sure he can walk you through the details there. But really, the rough buckets on that side is private equity. You can go to a hedge fund, which is equities-based typically. You can go to equity research on the buy side. So where I sit, I help sell companies. Where Danny sits, he buys companies and helps run them and then sells them eventually. Or you can go work in corporate finance and really help the internal finance function of those different companies. Danny, do you want to talk about the PE trajectory and how that works?
Definitely. And along with that, I just want to emphasize like one point in the investment banking section here that Rachel did mention, but kind of like the highly desired skill set piece. So not only do you come out of college with a really good salary that'll set you up really well and you're find really good jobs for like the next few years of your career, and you have a lot of flexibility. And so one thing that I pursued that I thought was really interesting was private equity. And so private equity is kind of the other side of investment banking. And so we pool together a bunch of money, and we invest it on behalf of other people. And what we do specifically is invested in other companies. And so we look to buy other companies, and as part of that process, we're interacting with people like Rachel on the investment banking side. And so you can see how people in investment banking, if you have that skill set, you kind of understand private equity. And so private equity really wants to hire those investment bankers. And so on the private equity side, you get to run businesses, own them, grow them. You get a lot of diverse experience, and then you sell the business at the end, and that's kind of how you make money. Hopefully, you grow the business, the value of the business increases, and then we return that money to our investors. But one point would just be, yeah, going into investment banking opens up a lot of doors to other interesting industries, and sets you up to have a career and flexibility with what you want to do. Share with the recruiting process quickly. I know it's early. It's definitely early for
Yeah.
you guys.
So this is a very early on, but it's good to have in the back of your mind because this process has moved up or sped up so much since Danny and I recruited, for sure. So I was the class of 2019 graduation. I don't know what Danny's. I think
I was
we were the
2019 as
same
well.
year. Yep.
Mhm.
So when we did it, I recruited for investment banking the fall of my junior year of college. Um, I got an offer very early. I took it and I immediately got out of the process. And I was like, I don't want to talk about myself in any more interviews. I'm done. One in the hand is better than two in the bush. But that process has moved up very early for some firms, and even earlier for DEI initiative hiring. So let's go through the standard process and then we can talk a little bit more on the DEI side. So typically as freshman and sophomore years, your first semester of sophomore year, you really need to be thinking about studying for investment banking interviews. There's a lot of public guides. We'll go through what we have published through Forma Futures, and you also really need to focus on your networking skills. When I tell you that I had an Excel file full of hundreds of names the last time I talked to people, their emails, three random things about them, like, oh, so and so just had a kid. Like, in 3 months, I'm going to ask him if he's getting any sleep. Like, I had detailed notes on everybody I've ever spoken to because those are the relationships and those are the people that can help you land a job later on. So, as a freshman and sophomore in college, you should be thinking about maintaining that high GPA, writing your resume, sitting down with mentors at Proforma Futures to talk about your story, where you're coming from, talking to Chris and Wall Street Connections, making sure that you're really leveraging your network to understand what you're doing. Take manageable course loads in your early years of college, and make sure that you're focused on getting some work experience. I'm kind of a rarer resume case in the sense that I did not have a finance internship up until my junior year. I focused on internships that I could pitch as my story. So think about who you are as a person. Think about what your resume should say about you. I'll give you a quick overview of what mine was. I worked at US Lacrosse as a coach educator. I worked as a men's lacrosse official, and I worked at a startup software company in sales. Those three things on my resume had absolutely nothing to do with investment banking or sales and trading. But the way that I pitched myself was that I could endure really shitty working conditions, pardon my French from that perspective. I could get kind of put through the ringer in terms of being an official, and people were very intense and had really heightened emotions around what I was doing. And I also could take rejection pretty well through doing software sales. Those three things on paper don't show up. But when I got to sit down and talk to people through my networking, I could position myself as a really strong candidate based on that skill set that I had developed through my work experience. And then when I sat down in interviews, I sounded like the candidate that they wanted. So think about the role that you're looking at, and this is not finance specific. Think about the role that you're recruiting for and how your work experiences go to check the boxes of key work qualities that those roles are looking to fulfill. For banking, it's willingness to work really hard, willingness to take criticism, and willingness to kind of take everything in stride without getting too flustered. So that's really a big part of your freshman and early sophomore year. Now the recruiting cycle in your sophomore spring is going to be focused on networking and now interviewing. Banks will start to open applications. And so I can tell you that the class of 2024 interns, when they're going to come in as juniors, we've already filled that here at Stiefel, and we filled it back in March or April. So it's going to be pretty early on. You need to have a good story there. And then as you transition into your summer before your junior year, you need to focus on building out your resume even more, working through that first internship or that second internship that you've pulled up, down, and make sure that you're talking to people, continuing that network, and continuing prepping for interviews, even if you're not actively recruiting. So the timeline that we have on this page is a little bit slower, so I'm just moving it up a little bit, so bear with me. As you head into your super days, making sure that you are sitting down with the people that you've connected with, touching base, asking them when their applications are open, and then really focusing on landing an opportunity. You should have that locked up by the end of your summer heading into junior year. And then hopefully you get to kind of walk through that junior year class schedule. Again, making sure that you're fulfilling all of those courses, taking as many finance courses as you can at that point. And then the summer before your senior year, you get to have your internship. The goal at most, if not all firms on Wall Street, whether it be investment banking, sales and trading, or other roles, is to fulfill their entire incoming class from the internship program that is sitting that summer. So the goal and the expectation is to provide full-time offers out of those programs to the individuals who have completed those programs. But you need to be standout, you need to be hungry for excellence, and you need to make sure that you're focusing on landing a job through that program. Chris, I saw you come off mute. Did I miss anything?
No, I was just gonna add that
Yeah.
for Kennedy and Jalea, they are approaching their college applications process, and just wanted to make clear to them that this timeline is like based off of getting an internship your junior year. However, as you hinted at with DEI initiatives, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, Kennedy and Jalea, you all are both women. There will likely be internships even your freshman year that you would be able to apply to and be a part of. So your freshman year of college, you'll have an internship where you're making quite a large sum of money if you prepare now and set yourself up for those roles.
Yeah, and I would definitely encourage you to make sure that you're taking as many of those internships as possible, even if you're not 100% sure that the internship is covering the job that you want down the road. I think it is incredibly valuable having experiences, knowing that I do not want to do something just as much as it is valuable to know that I do want to do something, because it does two things. One, it clarifies that I was very much not fit for a role, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But two, it also reaffirms that I feel validated and I am excited about the job that I am in now. So take as many of the opportunities as you can. I definitely did way too many internships when I was in college, but I can look back on those with the skills that I've gained, the money that I earned, and also kind of the reassurance that the job that I'm doing is the one that I want to do for the time being.
I guess since we're all talking, one quick thing that I wanted to emphasize here is how transformative it can be, not just for yourself and learning those skill sets, but also the support that you can give to your family and community around you as well. I'm sure other people on the call have had similar experiences to this, but I was able to use that large sum of money that I gained from my first couple of internships to help my family out of some very sticky situations. And I was also able to help other people that were interested in getting into the career of finance. Once I had already done it myself, I was able to help coach them through the process. So you really are able to enrich yourself and the people around you through opportunities like this. Like, it doesn't have to be investment banking, it doesn't have to be private equity, but when you are doing work that you truly are able to put your full self into, and you're able to be paid your worth, you're able to make a great impact and take a great deal out of it as well. Just tidbit I wanted to add.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a really phenomenal point. Okay, so I think we're almost wrapped up with the presentation. Danny, I know you had some recap things, and then we can hop into the website.
Yeah, definitely. And along with this, we'll share the website and some resources. So if you're interested, if any of this is interesting to you, it's never too early to start learning about the industry, and what Chris and Chris are doing makes a ton of sense. Never too early to learn. Never too early to start exploring what might make sense. And so I can show you what resources Proforma Futures has on their website that are completely free to download. So here, I'll share the website. And so This is the Proforma Futures website. I'll start at the home page. So just proformafutures.com. If you're interested in learning about different industries, you can go to the Learning tab. And then here are some really helpful resources to kind of get started in finance. And as we've mentioned, networking and talking to people is one of the best ways to get into the industry, because you learn more about the industry, you get more confident, and you also develop relationships. And so there's a presentation here that you can walk through, which shows you how to write a networking email. It's not super intuitive to write an email like this. Bob, comma, hope you are well. Like this stuff is, you learn it over time. But these are templates you can copy and paste as you start learning more, as you start developing relationships in the industry. Thank you, Curtis. And so that's one resource. Let's see here. Hide.
Yeah, that's a great resource. We already have them doing an exercise where they're connecting with mentors that we've provided. This is a great secondary resource that they can use in addition to what we've already provided them.
Definitely. Next, this is kind of as you're going into college, there's a bunch of resumes on here that are from students who are mentors in Proforma Futures from when they were students, and kind of when they were going for that big internship before their for their senior year. And so you can kind of flip through and see like, oh, what did they do for internships? What did they do while they were in college to kind of get some leadership experience, stuff like that.
Just on
There's
the
also,
resume,
go ahead.
on the resume point, one of the things that I thought is the most interesting and it's easiest to overlook, and we saw it briefly in those big bold red letters at the bottom of Connor's resume, is that what I look for, so I screen resumes for all of our incoming DEI hires. I also do it for all of our summer internship program hires and all of our laterals that end up in my group. So I see a lot of resumes, and my absolute favorite thing to look for on a resume is skills and interests. Um, it is one of the most overlooked sections, but also the section that can differentiate your personality the most. Um, my best friend from my first year in banking, his skills and interests read that he liked criticizing the front office decisions of the Washington Commanders. Like he just wanted to like yell about the coaching staff and like how they manage their teams. And that sounds like the most ridiculous thing to put on a resume because it has nothing to do with your job. But he talked about that point in every single one of his interviews with people who thought it was interesting. I've talked about the language interests that I have, or books that I've read, or trips that I've gone on. And it just gives someone a little bit more of you rather than what you've gotten to experience as a potential hire. Because in banking, I sit next to somebody for 12 to 14 hours a day. And it is great if they are perfect on paper, but it is even better if there's someone interesting that I can hang out with and at least tolerate for that level of time. And I hope they can say the same of me. So really consider that as you're writing your resume. It's definitely very important.
Thanks, Rachel. It's a very, very, very good point. Another resource we have on the website is team bios and why finance summaries. So if you're interested in people's stories who are current mentors, those are available here. Kind of what the struggles were, why they decided to get into finance. Just understanding other people's stories can sometimes help you refine why you want to do something. And then we have technical questions and qualitative questions. So as you go into these interviews and really early in your college career, it's difficult to know what they might ask you, what you need to prepare for. And so there's a technical side, which means like different types of accounting questions or valuation questions that you might get asked. So that's math. Those are math questions, things like that. And then there's a whole qualitative side, which is like, why do you want to do investment banking? Tell me about your story. Who are you as a person? So those types of questions, like telling a story. So there's two different sides, and we have resources for both of those. And then lastly, there's the presentation we're going through currently. the other thing I wanted to flash is just along with networking, on our website, if you go to the team page, this is really the kind of the most important resource at Forma Futures, but it's all of our people. And so we have everyone by their industry, what company they work for, and you can just scroll through, say you're interested in just reading about someone, they have a bio, what they're doing, and their email. So if you have that email template handy, and you think Flora is an interesting person to reach out to, you want to learn about her experience, you can reach out to her email, use that email template, and you'll get to have a great conversation to learn more about their career experience. But with
one thing to
or good.
emphasize here on the team page is that part of what's difficult about networking in finance is that people often don't return your emails, because you're just reaching out to a lot of people and you're like, hey, will you talk to me? And I can't tell you how many of those notes I get from random people on LinkedIn or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about you. The great part about this network is that all of these people that you see on the team page, there's literally over 100 of us. All of these people want to be resources for you. So if someone's face is on this page and their email is there, email them, and 9 times out of the 10 they'll respond. And the 10th time is just because they accidentally missed it or they had a really busy week. So don't feel intimidated by contacting these people. It's not a cold outreach email. It's not like, oh, who's contacting me? If you say, hey, I got in touch with Forma Futures, would really like to talk to you about your background, all of these people will effectively pick up the phone and answer that email for you.
Everyone's opted in. They want to help. They understand the mission. Think it's all a great thing. So, I mean, with that, definitely happy to take questions. Any other things you think we should discuss as a group, Chris? But awesome to come in today, and yeah, look forward to questions if there are any.
Kennedy, Jalea, were there any terms or anything that they said that maybe was confusing or you're interested in learning more about? Would appreciate you all sharing that.
With the whole internship things that you was talking about, like your junior year and stuff, like how does that actually really kind of work? Because like I kind of got confused like after that part, like after that whole point.
I can definitely take a pass at that one. So it's a great point. It's basically a really accelerated process. But so you'll start college, obviously your freshman, sophomore year. So during your freshman and sophomore year, you'll be preparing for an internship between your junior and senior year. And that it sounds weird because it is weird. It's a whole year ahead of time. And so you'll interview during your sophomore year for an internship almost a year later. And as Rachel mentioned this, but that internship in your junior year is really important because that internship then leads to a full-time job. Because they that you did well as an intern, we're gonna hire you as a full-time employee after you finish college. And so the kind of whole industry is structured around how do we get an intern in between their junior and senior year, and then how do we hire them as a full-time. So does that help a little bit, or I'm definitely happy to go into more detail.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Kennedy, the fact that you're confused is normal. You're way ahead
Not
of
straightforward.
just knowing that this exists. And to be clear, we did say that there were going to be freshman and sophomore year internships. For those, you wouldn't have to select an industry. Typically, it's just very general. They allow you to learn about different industries. And it's not until perhaps that junior year internship where you have to start thinking about, am I more interested in retail, which could include something like beauty and makeup? Am I more interested in industrials, which can include manufacturing bottles or making cans for beverages? So you wouldn't have to think very in depth about an industry until later in your college career. For now, just focus on understanding what is an investment bank, what is asset management, and that will be a great start.
Yeah, Chris, if I could disagree with you slightly, you don't even have to think about industry when you're looking at investment banking. Most banks are doing completely generalist programs. So you drop into a bank and then hopefully you get to see 3 or 4 different groups over the course of your summer. So when interns come into Stiefel, I am the summer staffer, so I essentially have a big pool of interns. I hand them out to different groups, and all of those individuals get to see between 3 and 7 groups over the course of their summer. So don't even sweat about if you want to do consumer versus industrials as an intern. You get your entire focus is investment banking interesting to you. Some banks will hire directly into groups, but the vast majority of the street will be really generalist. And then the other thing I want to add is, as you look at finding internships, when you get to school, most colleges have career resource centers. And so in addition to the programs that you work with here, Kennedy, you'll also have career counselors that you can go and ask. And those schools will also have databases and lists of different internships that are coming up, and they can help you facilitate that as well. So don't feel like you're all by yourself out there trying to navigate a very complicated timeline. You're going to have a lot of different people that have very clear expectations of what those timelines are, and they're 100% there to help you.
I would say in a similar vein, and thank you both for being here. I'm loving it. Like every time I have a thought, you're like hitting on something that inspires another vein. So sometimes people are scared off by, these different industries because they seem like very, Danny used the word opaque earlier, very unclear.
Unclear.
Yeah, it's very hard to know what is going to be required of you when you get there. So for example, on the off chance you do go to a bank and they are recruiting straight into an industry, they're going to teach you about it. It's not like you need to go in an expert. The same thing when it comes to knowing what you need to do on the job. You do want to, like they said earlier, take your freshman and sophomore year to really study as much as you can. But in terms of what you need to learn on the job or know when you get there, they're going to teach you a lot of that as well. Particularly if you go to a firm that's known for having a really strong training program. So that might be something you want to look at later down the line. We're throwing a lot at you right now. I want to see like where you all are and how comfortable you all are at this point.
Yeah, Jalea, did you have any questions or anything confused you? How comfortable are you?
No, I don't have any questions. I just thought it was great information though to know about taking the interns and everything that I have to do, but I don't have any questions.
No news is good news, right?
And
yeah,
we're always open for more questions, obviously, me and Rachel and everyone on the website. So always reach out.
yeah,
Very happy to talk.
this was great, Danny and Rachel. Just one last thing before you all close out. There was a page you all had that had a couple of other roles. Could you just quickly run through those for like a minute? They got a deep overview of investment banking, but just quickly run over the asset management, equity research, and maybe corporate finance. They've already learned about commercial banking and risk management.
Yeah. Do you want me to take that,
Danny,
or
do you want to go to you want to
Hmm?
cover asset management? I think the next page might have a little bit more detail on the buckets.
Perfect.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I can do investment or asset management. So that is those jobs right out of college. You're basically working for people who manage pools of money and they're deciding how to invest that money. And you might ask, like, where does that money come from? If you think about like pension funds for like firefighters or endowments for colleges or just wealthy people in general, they have money, they don't know what to do with it. They pull it together and they're like, okay, we need to invest in something. And so that creates all these different areas of investing in the economy. And so as an investment analyst, you could work at a private equity firm, kind of where I am, where you're investing in companies to try and make a return, or you can do the hedge fund route, which is very similar. You just have a pool of money, but you're trying to invest in, really anything, whether it's public companies, buying companies, debt, structured product. It gets really complicated. I don't know very much about it. But also, uh, just basically you're using money, investing it in stuff, and trying to make a return on it. But Rachel, you want to take equity research?
Yep. So equity research is the other side of kind of the wall. So in finance, there's a, they call it a Chinese wall, and essentially it's just public versus private information. So if you see a news article about the Apple CEO saying something about the company, that's on the public side. But where I get to sit in investment banking, I would probably know a lot more about Apple if I was working for them as their investment banker, like all of their details that they don't publish, right? So on equity research side, they sit on the public side. They talk to companies and they effectively write reports about how they think about the companies. They're all public. So they're going to write reports on publicly traded entities, and those will get published to the market. Market means anyone who can access those reports. And people will look at those reports and make investing decisions in those equities or in the credit based on those opinions that people publish. The upside is that it's very interesting, thoughtful work. You have a lot of analytical understanding. You get to learn an industry really, really well. The downside is that the skill set is not as sought after as investment banking. It takes a lot longer to become kind of the owner of a space where you are the expert at a firm. So your trajectory is a little bit longer. And it also typically has very blocky parts of being super busy and then super not busy, depending on when companies report their earnings and publish that information to everybody. So there's a lot more ups and downs, and you also are often required to get a CFA certification in order to become an equity research analyst, which can just be prohibitive, and it's a multi-step test that can take a lot of time to complete. So all of that being said, the exit roles that you can take from equity research are typically to hedge funds or working as an equity analyst or equity research person on the buy side. So as sitting more on Danny's side of the market versus where I would sit, or you might lead more broad research efforts at an investment fund. Because of the style of work and the requirements to get into the work, the compensation is typically lower than investment banking and or private equity. Your base salary will come in around $70,000 a year, up to 115 inclusive of bonus. But your hours are typically better. They're much more tied to the market, except for the periods of when companies report earnings. And then fourth main bucket here is corporate finance. So this is when you would work in a company. So pick any company that you can think of. That could be Apple, Google, Pfizer, anything there. They all have in-house finance functions in the sense of you're looking at financial statements, you're helping model, you're going to help manage the financial process, and you might be a part of any acquisitions of other companies that your company might be a part of. The upside is that the skill set is very similar to investment banking, but it has a much better work-life balance than IB, just meaning that your hours are a little bit better. The downsides are that it can be a lot longer ups and downs periods. So there might not be anything to work on in the near term. And your career optionality is a little bit more limited with FP&A, treasury, corporate development, and then way down the road would be like a CFO, chief financial officer position. Because of the dynamics, the hours, the role intensity, first year compensation is a lot lower than the other roles at 40 to 80K. But that can be flexible depending on the firm or the company, and that might be exclusive of bonus, which is much more contingent on how companies run themselves than the traditional banking percentage of base approach. Not listed on this page, you also have sales and trading. Sales and trading is actively making the market by buying and selling equities, credit, a number of different products. It's going to be more in line with the investment banking and asset management levels of intensity, compensation. The hours are a little bit better, but they start a lot earlier. When I did S&T, I started at 5:45 every morning on the desk, and I had to be like all up and running, but I got to log off around 7 p.m., which was great. So happy to connect you with anyone in the S&T world if that's something you want to discover. I don't know enough about it to talk about it in great detail, but it is another avenue that you can pursue with a finance background or interest. Chris, did that cover all the points? Or Curtis, I forgot which one of you asked to cover, but all right, perfect. If there's anything on these verticals or these roles that you have more questions around, we have mentors who work in each of these spaces that we're more than happy to connect you with if you have basic questions of like how, what, why, when, all of those basics. So let us know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you again for making time to speak with them. We're gonna do some work to figure out kind of next steps on how they can engage with Proforma Futures. We know you have your website, but we want to be even more intentional than that with how they engage with you all.
Amazing. Well, Thea, thank you
Sounds
for
good.
having us.
Kennedy,
Awesome.
Jalea,
Kennedy, Jalea, it was a pleasure to meet you both.
anything you want to tell them?
It was nice to meet you too.
It was nice to meet y'all. Thank y'all.
Of
Thanks
course.
so much.
Best of luck.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
You too all. All right, bye-bye.